here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the singer-songwriter Linda Smith, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. Started playing music in the 80s in various bands and also went on to a very long and successful solo career with home recorded music from the mid-80s. Recently has had various records reissued, so I so like Spring, and also Nothing Else Matters, which has come out on Captured Tracks Records, who's been very prolific in releasing her material. So I will give you the link to that Bandcamp page in the notes below, but you can hear the interview instead. This is going to be Linda and me. So after several minutes of interesting but slightly casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject that was the early formative years. Linda, it's over to you.
Well, you know, I say this, and a lot of people say it. It's not unusual, but seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan in 1964, so I was born in 1955, so I'm a little bit further back from you, but you know, as children, we saw that in 1964, and we were just, that was it, you know. And I was under 10 years old at that time. I was 9, I think, 9 years old. So
Yes.
It was a very impactful moment.
It's quite surprising, isn't it, in a way, when I've seen these 60s documentaries and you sort of have to realise what the culture was like and what it must have been like for those people watching and seeing the Beatles and the sound they were creating and the attitude they had, which was so different. I suppose it was almost the birth of the teenager in some respects as well, which was quite good. And what were your parents listening to? Did you have music in the house or any sort of cultural, I don't know, events that were going on that your parents were sort of drawn to?
I mean, well, we watched television, of course, and saw movies and things like that, but old movies. And but as far as records, there were Broadway shows of the time, you know, like West Side Story, South Pacific, My Fair Lady, some classical music. So it's, you know, those were the records. And
Yes.
I didn't start listening to the radio myself until after the Beatles came, and I had a transistor radio that I listened to all the time after that. And, you know, then I was listening to everything that was on AM
Yes.
radio. And you know, that was a big, you know, much bigger than the Beatles and the sounds that you could hear.
Yes, absolutely. And did you sort of then follow the 60s through from the age of 10 to the age of 16, which would probably be 1971? Was that kind of consciously in your mind all the time, seeing this kind of multicultural world happening in front of you?
Yeah, I listened to the radio all the time after that, and so I heard all the big hits, and there were so many different kinds of um, approaches to pop music that were all played in the same place, and that was what was so interesting. You know, as compared to now, or even in the 70s or 80s, things just started to become more, this radio station is for that and this radio station is for this. In the 60s, all the different sounds were played on the same radio station. And
Yes.
it could be middle of the road, it could be rock, it could be pop, you know, and a lot of it came from the UK. And in this country, a lot of it came from Motown, and as far as the top songs. So you had that kind of thing going on that you wouldn't hear that on the radio today. I don't listen to the radio today,
No,
so you know,
it's very,
you know,
it's very,
commercial radio. Anyway, I mean, there are many really nice internet stations that play a variety of things, but and WFMU, which is a broadcast station in New Jersey, they play a wide variety of things, but those aren't commercial stations.
yes. I think yes, everything is very sort of pigeonholed because in the I mean, I was more of an 80s indie kid, so during the 80s, I got very into the station, the program that was the John Peel show. And I mean, again,
Uh-huh.
you know, it's kind of interesting. People often go, "Oh, he just played one sort of music," but it's like, well, that's where I discovered kind of reggae, African music, rap
Oh,
music,
yeah.
kind of
Hmm.
extreme noise terror. But he also used to play lots of stuff from the 50s soul period
Yeah.
on the
Uh-huh.
Kent record label, which was quite, you know,
Hmm.
amazing. You know, Ella Washington and Irma Thomas and people like that as well. And it was all
Hmm.
on one show. So every night you had this absolutely 2 or 3 hours of absolutely bizarre music, which it was always interesting
Hmm.
because he had curated it. He didn't get given the playlist just to
Right.
play and
Hmm.
just make some amusing interest and banter between the records. It was his
Hmm.
obsession, which was, yeah, it was nice. And that's kind of, yes, you need a John Peel sometimes in your life. So as you then, yeah, so the 60s, you had that Motown period. I suppose you had country and Western as well,
Yeah, that
musicals.
everything was on there. A little bit of everything we had.
And when did you sort of start sort of thinking or playing a musical instrument? Did that happen during your sort of teen period, or was that a bit later?
Oh no, that was later after I guess late early 80s really.
Right.
When I started hearing listening to punk, new wave, and post punk. I guess post it was post punk by early 80s. So although I know these things kind of overlapped a bit, but I was really into the stuff coming out of the Rough Trade label, the Essential Logic, Young Marble Giants, the Raincoats, um, the Wanna Buy a Bridge compilation. So again, I was being influenced by what was coming out of the UK mainly, although there
Yes.
were, there was some great, um, we bought Talking Heads and Ramones and Blondie and Devo, they were all there too. So I guess it was late 70s, early 80s.
Yes. Oh, Essential Logic.
Patty,
There's a new compilation actually that's come out. They oh God, I'm not going to be able to find it now, am I? Oh dear. Essential. Oh, this is it. It was a John Peel session that was recorded in 1979.
oh,
That's just come out
okay.
on the Precious.
I'll have to look that up. I'd like to hear that.
So if you go to the Precious Recordings of London, I'll send you a link actually. They've got a very
Okay.
good website and it's
Uh-huh.
probably a Bandcamp page where you can get it. And this
Hmm.
chap called Nick, a one-man band, so to speak, has been
Hmm.
releasing John Peel and Janice Long sessions from the 80s and 90s,
Oh, that's interesting.
which is very exciting. And the Essential Logic John Peel session from 79 has
Uh-huh.
just been, so you would be able to at least to hear it, if not download some tracks. So or just
Hmm.
buy. So yeah, so it's funny you mentioned. I said Laura Logic, who was in X-Ray Specs, which was good. So when you got to 16, which was early 70s, did you then go on to college and whatever, higher
Well,
education?
it was kind of I tried a little college at that time, but I really stopped listening to um, basically listening to rock and pop music for several years, like from 1970 to 1977 or 78, and listened to classical and some other things. But I just lost interest in what was coming out at the time. It was becoming more um, singer-songwritery or heavy metal or whatever, hard rock or it was a weird period. I mean, some of that
Yes.
music now I can listen to, but I mean, it just wasn't the same as far as pop songs to me.
No.
I don't
And
know if that makes sense.
but then so the confessional singer-songwriter like Carly Simon, Joni Mitchell, Carole King, James Taylor, all these, did that not at all sort of excite you at all?
Wasn't interested, and I did see Joni Mitchell later on in concert, and it became to appreciate her. But that whole period of James Taylor and Carole King, there's some great songs there, but it just the whole style of it was way different. And then again, disco came in too.
Yes.
Um, and I wasn't into that. And of course, later I can listen to all these things and enjoy. But at the time, it was just such a big change, especially in the way the radio stations played things and what there was on the radio.
Yes.
And that was my source at the time, radio radio stations. I was not really interested so much in hearing that.
No, it sort of passed. So were you a studious person during the 70s? Were you sort of knuckling down to the world of education and careers at this stage?
Well, no, I don't think I was ever thinking of a career of any kind, and I was not in that mode. But for me, it was, I thought I might want to be an artist, a painter, something like that at the time, and that's what I was taking in college when I went.
Yes, and there you go. So then as we sort of get towards that world that you mentioned, sort of post-punk, which was
Mhm.
the late 70s with 78, 79, it's slightly different from there's New York and then there's the post-punk stuff in the
Uh-huh.
UK.
Mhm.
When did you start thinking about becoming a singer-songwriter?
Well, I think first of all, I thought I wanted to be in a band. Not so much a solo kind of person, but wanted to be in a band and put songs together and play shows. And I had no thoughts of recording anything at the time. I mean, I just thought, well, I want to get a guitar and play in a band. That phase. Get a guitar, play in a band, and play some shows locally and just see how that is. I don't think I ever really had a long term view on it.
Mm,
Like some people you hear, well, they started out and they were, something happened and then somebody found their music and then they were suddenly, thrust into world attention. But I never thought, of that kind of thing happening. And but for me, it was just it was an activity to kind of be explored.
yes, well, that's good. But then you mentioned sort of, those worlds of the raincoats. I'm not sure if you mentioned the Marine Girls that went on to be
Them
um,
too.
Tracy Thorn and yes,
Hmm.
the other members, the sisters, who I can't quite remember their name. So was that sort of music that became something that sparked more of an interest in discovering or sort of going down a different avenue on your creative path?
Oh yes, I mean definitely. Maybe say more than the American bands that a lot of the American bands were on Sire Records, which was a subsidiary of Warner Brothers, I think. So they had some connect, like Talking Heads, Devo, Blondie, I think was on
Yes,
something. They were all signed to some aspect of a major label for a while, and whereas the bands from the UK, Rough Trade was not what I'd call a major corporate label, but they had a very definite idea of what they wanted to put out and what they did put out, and a lot of it was far less slick sounding than the stuff that was coming from here. I don't say
yes.
slick; it's not slick really, but a lot less produced. That's the word.
Yes, I think much more sort of in the UK. I think there was not such a sense of a career in music. I think
Yes.
also
Hmm.
from sort of this point of view, in this part of the world, England or Britain anyway, there was a lot of unemployment during the 80s, and
Hmm.
79 Thatcher gets in, and then there's a bit of a tricky period because there's the Falkland War, so people gets very patriotic because wow, we're going to war
Hmm.
against for this
Mm.
little island near Argentina, and then there's the miners' strike, the unions, and there's this attack on the left, which still seems to be happening with various ways, which is fun.
Mhm.
But there was a huge amount of unemployment, and there was always marches about this, and there was a feeling that there was no career, and then there was this whole threat of nuclear war. So there was a sense that we were going to die anyway. So what was the point?
Right.
So the government set up a lot of kind of unemployment benefits and job seekers allowance and enterprise allowance schemes, just things sometimes to say, God, the figures are so embarrassing. We'll put people on schemes and then we'll be able to massage the figures and make it look quite good. And so there was one particular scheme that we had in this country where it was basically unemployment, but they called it enterprise allowance. For 1 year, somebody could just make up anything that they wanted to do: a musician, painter, writer, gardener. It didn't matter. You just had to say, and so you became slightly self-employed, but at the same time claiming a bit of dole money, rent, and your council tax. And during that period, there was a lot of creative people who sort of explored their things. Obviously, mostly we were quite young, so most people just spent it on drinking and fags and other such things. But there was a lot of people who formed bands at the same time. So there was that culture that came out of the UK, which is one of the reasons there's so many indie bands, because they mostly had one of those that period of the 80s. So you can imagine it was a fertile time, and we had these 3 music papers: NME, Melody Maker, Sounds. So there was this kind of interest and network alongside John Peel. I know a whole history of what happens in the UK during the 80s there. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it was very, very different than what was going on here, and as far as independent music. And here, everybody, I think, wanted to get on a big label or something. That was the aim. But there was no government support for it. I mean, this country is just too big and crazy. And I mean, and whatever music scenes we had were very, oh, it's on the East Coast or it's on the West Coast, and then there was maybe a little bit of happening in the middle.
Yes.
But so much harder to define it.
Well, it's one thing I kind of really noticed, that each of those places, like whether it's Seattle, New York, Athens, Georgia, all these kind of and elsewhere, LA, everything's kind of like a country in itself, isn't it? And it's a particular, there's a particular scene, a group of people, and a particular sound for about 5 years, and you think, oh, that was interesting. Group of young, happy, supple, people who could bend without pulling a back muscle, basically.
Well, what's interesting now is the lesser, and in this country, there are all these reissues coming out of bands and people like myself that nobody really, the larger world didn't know about. They knew about them maybe in their town or maybe in here or there in little spots, but they weren't. It wasn't, they never got onto a big label. They were maybe on small labels, things like that. So, and that was more of a 90s situation, I think.
Yes. And I think archiving has gone quite keen, hasn't it? People have started to want to archive and find all this stuff that
Oh, yes.
at the time it came and went. So we're in the 80s. When did you start writing and then also recording your first material?
Well, I started writing when I was in the band, writing songs that were performed by different. That was in a few bands, and slowly started writing songs within the band. But then I moved to New York in 1984 and was in a band there called The Woods, which has also been recently archived with a release.
What was that band? What was that band called? The
Woods.
The Woods, right?
I should send you a link to hear it, because that reissue label, Sundazed Modern Harmonic, put out a whole album of our stuff, and that has some of my earlier songs on it, and with a band that I recorded later on my 4-track, re-recorded. So that came out earlier that came out in September of 2023.
Oh, the compilation so long before now.
Yes, that's it.
So on those ones,
you pulled it up. You can.
I
hear
have
it.
pulled. I know. I can't hear it. That would just be rude. But you got Miracles Tonight, Never Before, Any Second, Far Away. Which songs did you write on that album?
Miracles, Any Second, Gorgeous Weather, The Real Miss Charlotte, Idea. Um, there's a couple other ones on there too. But some of those I ended up re-recording and putting on my first single for Harriet Records in 1990.
Right.
But these are sound. It's the same song, but it sounds very different because there's other people playing, and it's a band with
Yes.
real drums, real bass player, cello player, singing. We got into harmonies, singing harmonies and things like that. So um,
It's been
it's
nice.
kind of
It's been nicely
free.
repackaged as well, hasn't it?
Oh yeah, they did a great job.
There
They
you
did a great
go.
job.
And has there been quite a
And
bit of interest with it?
well, when it came out, well, you know how things they come out now, and everybody's interested in it for a month, and then they move on to something else. But um, it's it's it got a really nice review on All Music, and pretty much they didn't say anything bad about it. So they only say good things. So I mean, we were all happy. We were all happy to have it out, as I'm still in touch with all the other band members, and to finally have that put out and most of it was recorded in the studio. In fact, all
Yes.
of it was recorded in an actual studio. But some of the songs were not really. They were rough mixes. That's all I had. We only just had rough mix copies, and so we never got to do final mixes on most of it.
Yes. And where was that the photograph taken of you in front of the? I suppose it's a river, isn't it?
Well, we were on the Staten Island ferry, so in the background you can see, I guess, Staten Island. I think that's what it's facing.
Yes.
Um, the boat that goes from Manhattan over to the island.
Nice. My God. And did you play any live shows?
We played 4 shows in our time. We were together 2 or 3 years, but we didn't play out very much because we weren't really like we didn't have a manager or anything. And if we played, it was because another band that we knew
Yes.
asked us to open or something. But we didn't go. We weren't able to really put time into doing what you have to do to get shows. But we
Yes.
played some good clubs. We played CBGB. We played Maxwell's in Hoboken. We played Pyramid Club. So um, there
God,
was
that's
usually some people there, and but we were not really a live band for very long or for very much.
no, but that's fantastic. And it must have been so strange having something released that was recorded and written 40 years ago that had been sitting in
Oh
someone's
yes, hmm
dusty cupboard.
was sitting in my file cabinet on a cassette, a couple of
Yes.
and a friend did a lot of work to clean up a friend named Bob Huff did a lot of work to clean up the tracks to make them sound um, bring out the different dynamics in there, and it worked somehow.
Yeah, yes, there's been some very good sort of studio wizardry recently that people have had stuff remixed, and it's yes,
It's amazing what you can do now to kind of save damaged or old crumpled cassettes. I mean,
absolutely. And did the four of you have a little bit of a nostalgic kind of Zoom get together or some sort of
no,
little?
not actually. We never did that. We never did that. I was interested in trying to do that some which way, but it hasn't happened yet. So
No,
maybe that'll be in the future
when you get the next royalty check, I guess.
when we get the first one,
The first one.
whatever
Yeah.
that, wherever that is.
Retirement here or
But I
like
was
a
just happy to have it out, after
yes.
all
Well, I
these
think I
years.
think most artists are just really excited to have it
Hmm.
somehow again archived and sort of held as something that's going to be around a little bit longer. So that's all good. So after the Woods, what was your next? Did you become a solo artist, or did you also go through a few other lineup changes or
No,
bands?
that's when I decided, I bought a 4-track machine, and when I was still living in New York to explore making demos for the band, demos of new songs, so that I could give them a tape and they could hear what the song sounded like with, different parts that I might also play. But it would give an idea of how I wanted to sound. And I thought that might be more easier than me just coming in and strumming it in a practice. And although that worked fine, but I really wanted to explore that. And I wasn't really thinking of it as something I would do as an end in itself at the
No.
time. But then found myself enjoying that process a lot more than practicing. And we're trying to play shows and things. And I just thought that wasn't going anywhere really. And although I did enjoy the times that we got together and did the recordings in the studio, I liked that. So I just kind of gravitated more towards getting things down on tape, either myself or with other people. But it was just more easy to do that with a 4-track cassette recorder. I mean, I didn't have to go anywhere.
So was most of that material that you started writing in the mid-'80s, was this what ended up to be the album, The Space Between the Buildings? Was this your first kind of proper release on a cassette or?
That was, and all of those were written in the late '80s. They were written for that cassette. I'd not done any of those with. Oh, wait a minute. I think I did one song with the Woods that's on that cassette. I get them all mixed up at this point, but most of those were all new songs that were written specifically for the cassette.
Yes. And then you were definitely on a roll at this stage, because you then sort of come out with about 4 new kind of releases. So with those ones that Do You Know the Way, Love Songs for Laughs, and Put It in Writing, this was your sort of literally an album a year up to the early 90s, wasn't it? Or cassette.
Yes. And it's something I did a single for Harriet Records, an EP of 3 songs that came out in 1990. And then I did one for Slumberland of 3 songs in 1992.
Yes.
So those were there, but that was, those were put out by other labels and they were on vinyl and was something that I couldn't really do myself. And I wanted to see where that went, if you could. Singles were big at the time, indie label singles, and I just thought it was great to have something out like that too.
Well,
But meanwhile, I was
absolutely.
still going to do my cassettes because I could take care of the whole thing. I didn't, I just did that, and I did it
Yes.
at home, and there was no. And then I would run off the cassettes myself too if people wanted one.
Yes. Well, it's always good. And did you because you did those 3 singles, didn't you, on various different people's labels, which was,
Hmm.
you mentioned Harriet, which is Gorgeous Weather. Then with Slumberland, it was Till Another Time. And then you did one, Remember Your Heart. So you did those, which was a very interesting label. And so
I
they
don't even know what happened to that label. I mean, I think they put out a few things and then nobody ever heard from them again. That was a German label.
right.
Um,
Wow, there you go. The 90s. It was
mhm.
a crazy time. And then from then, did you then, the next kind of release was this one, Nothing Else Matters, which came out mid-90s, wasn't it?
1995.
Right. And so musically, do you then, with the cassettes, did you used to just run them off when people wanted them and just sell them kind of just almost like when you got a letter or a card or?
Oh, yes. Yeah, it was done basically through the mail because there was no internet then, and there were no way
No,
to email people and no way to hear music on the internet where people there was no Bandcamp or anything like that. So
no.
um,
It,
the thing that helped with the cassettes, particularly the first couple, was getting reviews in magazines like Option,
right.
which was a big sort of alternative music magazine, came out of California, I believe, but it was distributed all over the country and I guess in other countries. And they had a whole section in the back was just nothing but cassette releases put out by people who put out anybody who put out a cassette. So you could send it there and get a review. And that's what I did. And so people started writing, and they put your address in the review at the bottom of the review, and you could put the price of the cassette if somebody wanted to buy it. And so I started getting letters from people asking to buy the cassettes. And then
Amazing.
I'd run it off myself on my double cassette deck, and I made the covers, pop it in an envelope, and send it to them.
Fantastic. That is so
But that,
DIY.
yes, that was the true DIY time.
That was very, yes. And were you in New York at this stage as well?
Now, I had moved back to Baltimore after I had made the first cassette. Well, I started getting some letters when I was still in New York, because I think it was reviewed while it was still there in option. And
Yeah.
so it's basically, and I still have some of those letters from people requesting cassettes and sending. And a lot of times they'd slip the actual cash in the envelope.
Yes.
Because it would be $3, they'd take three $1 bills and put them in the envelope.
Yes, it's quite sweet, really, isn't it? Yes, those days of, yes, I
Those
remember
days are
sort of,
done.
right, yes, either going to the post office and getting something called a postal order, which was like a check, but if you didn't have a bank account, or you
A
just
postal,
attach
yeah.
some coins and put them sort of around I suppose a little bit of cardboard as well, so it didn't feel too
Right.
obvious for the postman or woman. And then you'd sort of send it off and then hope to hear. And it was always kind of amazing when a few weeks later you got your fanzine or some 12 or 7-inch single. I remember getting a few of those, which was just so exciting. Written by
Yeah,
the artist.
fanzines. The fanzines, the Xerox zines were done like that too, and so it was very much like I never did this, but others, I had, there were a lot of people making those Xerox fanzines, and I still have a couple of those too.
Yes, it's all good. But then what happens with we get into the mid-90s? Do you then sort of have another career change and path, or just stop sort of making?
Well, I think what happened was that CDs were the thing, and I thought, well, it would be nice to have a CD release, because CDs were the thing, and uh, people still bought cassettes, but I decided I kind of got away from making the cassettes and running them off stuff, and I guess by 1995, and got in touch with Feel Good All Over label, which was run by John Henderson, and we agreed. We sort of had a verbal agreement that I would record an album and he would release it. And he sent me in advance, actually, so I could buy a new 8-track reel-to-reel tape recorder, and try that and get. I wanted to get beyond the 4-track, because that had kind of come to the end of what I could do with that. And we did a CD of Nothing Else Matters, and 1995 he put that out.
Yes, and this is the one that you sort of said this is when you were having to juggling between being creative and having a mundane job, commuting to work as well.
Yes.
So
Well, that was always the case. The job was always the mundane job, whatever it was. But and it was always kind of like, and many other people did this too. They had a job, but they worked on music or whatever.
yes,
When they
and you
weren't
did,
at work.
and on that album you do a cover of the Young Marble Giants Salad Days as well, don't you? Had you
Yes, and
become quite?
that was, well, I was just wanted to say, but that was not on the original album. That was recorded for a tribute album that never came out, a tribute to the Young Marble Giants.
Yes, and it's quite an interesting album, kind of sonically. You do quite a lot of different little bits and pieces on it. So did the did being on a label and having the advance, does that give you a bit more creative scope to experiment more?
Oh, yes. Well, I think the whole idea is, with the 8-track was that I could put more s- more tracks without having to bounce anything down, and I could have everything more separate. Once you got it with the 8-track reel to reel, there was a much clearer sound than you could get with a 4-track cassette. And so I just, once I got the 8-track, I just thought, oh, I want to do this little part, and then I want to do another track with this little part. And whereas with the 4-track, it was pretty limited how many tracks you could bounce before it got kind of mushy. But
Yes.
this way, I could have more separate things going on. And I had a Rickenbacker 12 string at the time. I had the use of an old Farfisa organ. Um, and most of the stuff that I think pretty much most of the stuff, the percussion is hand played percussion. Um, I don't think I used much in the way of drum machine on that I can
Yes.
recall.
Yeah. So with the creative process, what sort of comes first, the lyrics or the melody?
Well, it can vary. Um, on rare occasions, they might come together at the same time, but a lot of times I might jot down some couple of lines and then start to put together a chord progression and then add some more lines and structure the song sort of back and forth like that. And but a lot of times the song might have been recorded. Being recorded, I might have actually developed the song in the recording while I
Yes.
was recording it.
And were you generally quite quick at that process, or did you have to go back and work on songs, or did you just have quite a sort of efficient process of getting an idea and working it through until execution?
Well, I have to say I was not much of a reviser. Like, I'd work on a part to get it to the point where I thought, well, that's acceptable. But I wasn't out for trying to get it to sound uh, perfect, if that's that's the word, And I wanted it to sound real, like it
Yes.
was a real person putting this together, and um, just trying to work out ideas. And I never really, once I got a part down that was, and I usually tried to get it, I never went back and redid it usually.
Yes.
If I got it like a guitar part, if I got the part down in an hour or so, that was it. Then I moved on to the next thing. And finally the vocals would be done. That was the
Yeah.
hardest part, the vocals, I think.
And that was all recorded at home as well in your studio.
Uh-huh. Hmm.
Yeah. So this was all done on Feel Good All Over, which was run by John Henderson in Chicago.
And now he has a label, and you may have seen it, called Tiny Global Productions. And he's been releasing Stuart Moxham's music, as well as a band called House of All that
Yes.
is former Fall members. So he's got a lot going on now with that
God, he's got
label.
so much going on. Yeah, he's
I mean, look,
just
he's doing a lot, and but he doesn't live in Chicago anymore. I think he lives in Spain
that's right.
now.
I've actually done an interview with him, which was
Oh,
quite
you
fun.
have?
Yeah, so
Okay,
because
okay.
I know there was I mean, he's got new material from some of a lot of the
Hmm.
artists from that period, but he's also done a bit of archiving as well. There was a band called Grey Factor who did some experimental stuff in 1 year, and that was it. And
Hmm.
that was, I think, 79, and that's just been given light of day with a new release. And
Hmm.
yeah, so that's John. My
Hmm.
God,
That's it.
he's
The same
been
John.
the same John. Yes, Sally Timms, Magnetic Fields, The Full Beat Happening, Linda Smith, all those. God, that's
Hmm.
incredible. Yes, so oh, that's a nice connection. I was wondering who that was. But then from release that you've just had, these reissues. So the following year, you brought out the album I So Liked Spring. So that was recorded the following year, which is another collection of material, which is another 12-track album.
And that one was different in that I used poems for lyrics and poems by Charlotte Mew, English poet of early 20th century, and because I wanted to see what it would be like to set someone else's words to music,
Yes.
how that would affect creating a song, putting it together, and it wasn't verse, chorus, whatever, however a song is usually constructed, but and that was put out only on cassette by Shrimper.
Yes. So how did you come across Charlotte Mew? Because she was born 1869, lived till 1928, an English poet whose work spanned the Victorian period and modernism as well. So how did she come into your consciousness?
Well, I came across a biography of her. I think it was earlier. I think it was 1992 or something. I came across a biography by Penelope Fitzgerald about her, and she's not a poet that's well known, probably more in the UK than here, but and that was interesting too. It wasn't like, I'm setting the poems of Emily Dickinson to music or whatever, because everybody knows Emily Dickinson, and
Yes.
she was a lesser known poet.
Blimey. Did you then go to Hampstead Cemetery in London to visit her grave when you were visiting the UK?
Well, in 2018, I was in the UK for a trip, just the first time I'd ever been there, and I thought I'd go up there and I'd see where the grave was, but I never found it, and because they didn't have very good directions, and the only people up there that day were the groundskeepers, and they didn't know where it was, and and there was nobody in the little office at the front. Have you ever been up there?
No, I haven't. I haven't had
You ought
that.
to go up there. I mean, it's something, and so I never found it. I never found it, and then finally I got a book. I found a book about that cemetery. So when I decided to go back in December, I was doing some shows with Nancy Andrews. When I went back last December, I thought I'm going to get up there and I'm going to find it, because the book had the actual
Yes.
location, and but I never was able to get back up there to see it. We just didn't have time, because
So
that would have been a
close.
whole day. I know. I have
Yeah.
to go back again. That means I'll have to come back.
I think were you playing at Cafe Otto at that stage, or
Yeah.
was that
Uh-huh.
right? So you were there. So what you've done 12 of these songs, poems.
hmm
Were there any particular ones that resonated with you quite strongly at this stage?
Well, I think the first one I did, I actually did for one of the cassettes. I So Like Spring. I made another. That was the one I first did before I went a couple years later and did a whole bunch of the other poems. And I re-recorded I So Like Spring so that it would sound just like all the other recordings I was making. Because the first recording I made is the spring song was on 4-track and sounds quite a bit different. And but that one, because it was short, the poems that I picked were short, and
Yes.
they lent themselves to uh, making a song, like a 2 or 3 minute song from. And of course, she wrote other poems that are quite a bit longer, but I wasn't going to go there.
Yes, God, that's and that was on Shrimper. And then after
hmm
that, really, because just to say, these two albums, the Nothing Else Matters and I So Liked Spring, these have just been reissued on, is it Captured Tracks
Yes. Uh-huh.
record
Capture
records?
tracks.
So did they come out 2023 or 2024?
Those came out March 1st of this year.
Oh my God, that's my birthday. There you
Oh,
go.
happy birthday. Happy
Yeah, thank
belated
you.
birthday.
I know, slightly, but there you go. That's great. Oh my God, so that's brilliant. So, who was the person who instigated it? Was it from the label, or were you looking to sort of have them reissued?
Well, I had always wanted to have them. I had, since all this kind of started, Capture Tracks released that compilation in 2021 of a selection of my songs. It was called Till Another Time.
Yes.
So I already had a contract with them to release more music after that in sometime in the future. And so they agreed to, this is now 2021, now it's 2024, to re-release two complete albums, because the first album was selection of things from cassettes
Yeah.
um, and from the 8-track stuff. And so I was very happy to find, I thought, well, maybe they would want to put out one of these sort of mid-90s things. And but they decided to do two at the same time. And so I was very happy, because I particularly really, really wanted both of those to kind of get the reissue treatment. Um,
Yes.
and with on vinyl, I'm really into the vinyl reissue. I mean,
Well,
it's
God, yeah, absolutely.
the way to
So,
go,
yes, well, let's face it, it's
because they were
there's
never on vinyl.
well, quite. And
Mhm.
CDs are great, but they're not sexy. Vinyl's kind of sexy, isn't
Right,
it?
right.
So, with your
Mhm.
album that you brought out, that compilation, Till Another Time, 1988 to 1996, that came out on vinyl, but that's sold out now, hasn't it?
I
Or
think there are still some copies on white vinyl, but the
white vinyl.
original the original pressing sold out, I believe.
Yes, that's just
But
brilliant.
it's still available on white vinyl on Bandcamp and at the Capture Track site.
Right. So these two have just come out. And has it sort of been generally exciting to see them out and about being reviewed and sort of available from all good
I,
record shops?
it's great. It's great. And yes, all good record shops. I'm on Instagram. There are quite a few record shops that'll post new records that they're selling and things. So I'm seeing a lot of the record shops in Europe or in this country who are featuring them on their Instagram accounts, which is great. I mean, it's really nice. And uh, you can't say anything bad about that.
No, no, you absolutely have. You'd have to be very odd to say something bad
especially
about that.
after especially after all these years. I mean, to see this on vinyl, in the vinyl format, with nice packaging, and their own colored vinyl. And it's just it's one of those things that, 10 years ago, or maybe even 5 years ago, I really wouldn't have imagined, because
No,
I was kind of like, well, that's whatever. And something about the pandemic, with people kind of uh, looking into their pasts, and that's kind of what I did. I kind of looked into my musical past, because I had a drawer full of cassettes, and that's where the Woods thing kind of generated from that too. And the resurgence of vinyl,
yes,
it just sort of evolved to this point in a
I
very
know.
short amount of time.
No one would have ever thought of that, really,
No,
the
no,
vinyl coming back. But then, I've got to that point where obviously I grew up with the vinyl in those
mhm.
decades, 70s, 80s, then 90s, things changed and I was moving house. So it was CDs really, wasn't it, at that stage? But we've got rid of our
CDs were forced upon us,
forced
and
upon us and we've got rid of those and they're all in the charity shop. And well, I don't think we'll ever have a moment wanting CDs again. But even I've still thought, because I haven't got rid of a selection of vinyl. I mean, I had to get rid of a
mhm,
bit because of having to move house a few times, but there was
mhm.
something I could imagine one day buying a little record player and just sitting there doing that whole process of the record, because there's an aesthetic beauty and art to a vinyl record, and the
Mhm.
sleeve and the inner sleeve and all that malarkey. So yes,
Yes.
and so did it, when you put it on the record player, did it sound quite magical at this stage with those two releases?
I have to say it did. I mean, I don't know whether it's just a sort of um, the fact that, it was on an actual 12-inch vinyl record, that it sounded completely different to me
Yes,
than
I
the
know.
original did.
I know
It
that must
sounded
just,
very, very different.
God, and I
And,
have to use my think that's nearly 30, yes, 20,
mhm,
28 years ago.
almost 30 years.
30 years it was there. Blimey, it's good stuff, isn't it, really? So then, so with the career, you continue to make an awful lot of records. Emily's House, Something New, um, going right up to last year, A Passing Cloud. This is with Nancy Andrews. Is this another?
Mhm.
So what was this release?
Well, this is actually I would say the first release since the Emily's House in 2001, the actual songs that I collaborated on with her. And, I had done an album in 2021 of instrumentals
Yes.
for a small label in Italy called Almost Halloween Time. You may have heard of them. And they release a lot of things too. And, but I hadn't really recorded any songs in a long time. And Nancy had been working on some music. She lives in Maine. She had been working on some songs. And of course, it was the pandemic again. Um, we started trading tracks back and forth. And I was adding some things to her songs. And then I had to get together a way of recording digitally because I didn't have any kind of um, digital audio workstation. I didn't have any equipment. I didn't have anything because I hadn't done this in years. And and that happened before the instrumental album. So it's all kind of been in a very compact space of time that I started recording again.
Yes.
And and so the thing that we did was all trading tracks back and forth to make new recordings. We didn't record in the same room, except at one time there was we did a couple tracks in Baltimore, but most of it was recorded by trading tracks.
And did you bring out a single as well last year as well? I seem to remember sort of various
Oh,
release.
I re-recorded a couple of my old songs and put out a single myself because I wanted to do that process of self-releasing something again. And I thought, oh, this will be fun to do a single, two songs, old songs, and I did that in 2022.
Yes, I remember now. Yes, I remember sort of, I think I got a link and you sent, was that what was the single called? God, I can't remember now. Was it
I
Fragment
did
of,
Figment of Your Imagination.
yes, Figment, not
Hmm.
Fragment. Yes, that was it. Yes, I do remember now that came out. So that's still there as a download as well, isn't it? So yeah,
Hmm.
my God. So with that, I mean, very exciting year. Have you got any more sort of recordings kind of in the pipeline or any more plans that are sort of
I
happening?
do, I do have some plans to start a new kind of an album of some kind. And just see where that goes. I mean, I have all the stuff here now, so I can just sit down and uh, and put things together and go along. And I'm retired, so I don't have a job anymore, and there's more time. Lately, though, the live performance thing has sort of come into the picture where I did the shows in the UK. And
Yes.
next week, I'll be doing some shows on the East Coast with some friends a band called the Smashing Times, which is their Baltimore-based band, and they do a lot of touring, and they put out a couple albums. Their most recent album is on K Records, and so they asked if I wanted to also perform on some of their tour dates here in
Yes.
Baltimore and DC, Philadelphia, and New York. So we're going to do that next week, and but then after that, I really plan to start thinking about what do I want to record next, and because I can't do two things at the same time. I'm very kind of like focus on one thing, then I'll focus on something else.
Yes, well, I know multitasking is overrated. Did you?
I'm
How
not.
did
I'm
you?
not good.
No, I'm not either. I think people lie when they say they can.
Oh yeah.
So, how was your live shows in the UK? This was at Cafe Otto, I believe.
Yes, and another show we did in Glasgow at Glad Cafe.
Right.
Another small venue, but I mean, and then we did a small venue in Fife on the Scotland,
Yes.
and that was a very very small show. It was a brewery record store called it's escaping my mind what it was called, but but that was a start that we started with that show, and there wasn't a whole lot of people there, maybe about 10, and then we went back to Glasgow and did the Glad Cafe,
Right.
and the name of the place in Fife, and they do shows quite a bit out there, particularly in the summer, is called Fuddle, Futtle, Fuddle. So if you ever get out that way, stop
Yes.
in for some good beer and look at some records and maybe hear a show. I mean,
Yes.
it was a ways out there, but we got there, and I really enjoyed it. It's beautiful out there, and the people are very very nice, great people running that place.
So,
And
are you meeting people that have just discovered your music, or have you met some people who knew about you from
I
back
think
then?
it's a combo. I think, and I'm not quite sure who is who and how, but I noticed that in the at the Glasgow show at Glad Cafe, those people were already some the people who came up and spoke to me, or that I knew had met or communicated with before. They knew my stuff, old stuff, and someone actually asked me to sign one of my singles, my old singles, the Harriet single,
Wow.
who had bought it back then. So that was kind of surprising. So they were already in the know, I guess, some of the people there. And then at the Cafe Otto, they seemed to be a little bit younger group who may have who just started to hear about it, maybe from the Capture Tracks
Yes.
compilation or something,
And it's a
and
very
or
hip
Bandcamp.
and happening place, isn't it? I sort of get
Oh,
endless emails, and you can see what's happening each month, and you think, wow, that's just so cutting edge and avant-garde. So I think you must have they must
I
have
don't think we were, but I don't think of myself as avant-garde music, but it is very kind of off the beaten path.
yes, I
The
know.
pop song, and not something you're going to hear
No.
generally, but
I think Thurston Moore, I don't know if he still does, but he seemed to sort of often be around that area. I don't know if he still is in the
mm,
UK. I think
mhm.
he probably does the washing up or something. I don't know. Something. I'm making that up now. Yeah, so yeah, it's brilliant. Well, I'm pleased that you've got out and played live and had a nice time. And I mean, with a lot of artists, they often have one. They find that one country has taken them a little bit to heart. Is there any other countries that you think, oh, we're big in Italy or big in Spain, as in there's people who seem to be downloading our material. Because I noticed on
Well,
Spotify you have a 31,000 listeners a month, which is, well, nearly 32, which is quite amazing. Well, it's good.
well, yeah, it is. It is. I mean, it's not Taylor Swift territory, but it is. It is. It is kind of shocking for me after all these years, and only in the past few years to have that kind of interest. I I think Spotify. I look at to see where people are listening, and it may be at different places for different songs.
Yes.
And but what's interesting is to look at where that you'll see somebody in some place I've never even heard of. One person listened to the song, one song.
Excellent.
in I don't know, someplace I've never even heard of. It's way out, and maybe it's in Africa, maybe it's in Saudi Arabia, a town that I don't know. One person
Yeah,
listened to the song from that
fantastic.
place.
Do you also get a figure for the for Bandcamp as well, where people are sort of buying tracks from? Does that give you a list as well of places that you're a sort of popular?
Well, I don't. On Bandcamp, people can become followers, so I can see where those people are from, and but I can't tell who actually, because you can listen to something on Bandcamp without paying for it. They allow that, so I don't know where all those unknown listeners are coming from. But
No.
there are people in the followers group are from Japan, Germany, UK, France. So there's a little bit of people all over the place,
Yes.
wherever they can get the Bandcamp.
Wherever happened. Well, it's. I guess it's quite instant as well. But you've got a couple of live dates, haven't you? Was it New York you got? Or no, or have you had New York?
But that's next week. The next weekend, New York, Brooklyn, place called Union Pool,
Yeah.
and in Philadelphia, another small place there, and a small place in DC, and a small place here in Baltimore. Here, the place in Baltimore is called Normals. It's a bookstore, record store, and performance place. Played there a couple of times.
Oh.
Last year, I played with Nancy there when we had our album come out last March.
Yes. God, it sounds.
So it's kind of a lot of stuff at within a year's time that I haven't really. It's hard to put Between the Woods, the Nancy Andrews album, these two releases, and playing in the UK. It's all kind of really like close together. So I don't really understand the effects of it or the response at this. I mean, I can't put it together as far as what is happening, connecting all those
No.
outside of, you know what I mean? I mean, it's odd.
I guess you just have to go with the flow, as they say in certain circles, don't they? So I guess it's just a holistic cosmic thing that just is rolling on. But at least it's very
That's
creative.
nice.
I think
It's nice.
it must be very nice and inspiring to sort of create some new material as well and see what happens. But I'm so pleased. This record label that you're on, it looks absolutely amazing. Captured tracks. So I will
You'll
check
find
it out.
many nice things there if you.
I will.
I think they have ways to listen to most of what they have. A lot of great records on there. They have a lot of other reissues, plus a lot of new artists.
Yeah, I was just having a look at their sort of roster, and everyone's very busy, aren't they? Which is all very good. That's great. Well, look, Thank you ever so much. And I will, if you want, I can always send you the link, and you can always put it on your social media page. And I'll also send it. I
Yes,
think there's
please do.
also a copy I'll send to your person that captured tracks as well. I think I got in
Oh,
touch with them,
yes.
didn't they? So there you
Yes.
go.
Yes, there was a little email overlap there
I know,
some
it
way.
was very
Um,
exciting.
but yeah, they'd love to hear it.
Yeah, well, thank you again, and I'm looking forward to yes, hearing a lot more of the material. So look, thank
Hmm.
you, and I'll let you have a nice afternoon. I'll go and have my tea. But look,
Oh,
have a
yes.
great day, and thanks
Okay, you
again, Linda.
too.
Take care of
Okay.
yourself. See you.
Hope all goes well for future too.
Yes, let's keep that. Yeah, I know what a year. I know you've got an election as well. Blimey. Let's
Hmm.
let's not go there.
No,
Okay, take
that's all
care.
other
See you.
conversation. Bye bye.
Bye. Yeah, indeed. Bye.
Thank you.
And that was me in conversation with Linda Smith. Yeah, a massive thank you for giving me the time for that. Also, as I said, she's had several albums brought out on Captured Tracks Records. And also, she's got a very good Bandcamp page, which I will put in the link. This has been the C86 Show, David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just do C86 Show. All these fascinating interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbeam. It's true. Have a great week. Stay safe.